Living in Virginia, you're in the fast lane on the information superhighway. We've invested $3 billion in Virginia's broadband network to give you one of the fastest internet connection speeds in the world, so you can build relationships, bring new business to our state, and meet the future of education. It's amazing what we can do together. Visit VCTA.com to learn how broadband connects the Commonwealth.
Hello, I'm Ray Lemura, and welcome to this edition of Cable Reports. Our guests today are Senator Scott Surovell and Delegate Mark Sickles. Welcome.
Good to be here, Ray.
Good to be back, Ray.
Glad to have you all can join us. Senator, why don't you tell us a little bit about your district?
Well, the 36th district's about 45 to 50 miles long, starts up in Fairfax County, Beacon Hill, Kingstown area, runs down through Mason Neck, Lorton area, goes through Occoquan, down through Woodbridge, sort of wraps along the Potomac. There's a string of it that heads up towards Forest Park High School, up 234 in Prince William, and then it has about 4 precincts in northern Stafford, one that runs out Garrisonville Road about 10 minutes, another one that runs down the Widewater Peninsula. About 210,000 people nowadays. Basically, it ends where the hot lanes ends.
Okay.
On 995.
Who are some of the major employers in your community?
You know, there's actually not any really huge employers. I would say probably the biggest employer in my district might be Walmart. I think my district probably has about 3 or 4 Walmarts. Inova Hospital is pretty big.
Right.
Centera Hospital's right on the border of my district.
Right.
Technically, I guess actually Fort Belvoir and the Quantico Marine Corps base are right in the middle of it. So, you know, the federal government employs probably a ton of people in my district.
Right.
I've never actually looked at the actual data, but I have a lot of government workers that go up and down 95. That commute north, and then on the Mount Vernon part of my district, a lot of people that commute into DC for their jobs.
Right, right. And Delegate, how about you tell us about your district?
My district is the northern part of Scott's district. I also have precincts in Senator Evans and Senator Barker's district. I include Franconia area, Huntington, Kingstown, Old Newington, and Lorton, down to the VRE station, and actually about 3 miles below the VRE station. I've got a couple VRE stations in the district, and the end of both the blue line and the yellow line both end in my district. Right. So yeah. It's a district that's oriented toward Washington, and actually people can go across to Maryland to work at the Naval Research Center or go out to the Dulles Corridor. Have a lot of people live in my district that go in different directions. Right. In the morning.
Right. What committees are you serving on this year?
Well, I'm on Appropriations Committee, which is the busiest committee, and I'm on the Transportation Subcommittee, Health and Human Resources Subcommittee, and the Transportation. I said that already. So one more. Anyway, it's early in the morning, Ray. And Health, Welfare, and Institutions, the Authorizing Committee for Health and the Medicaid program generally, and all things associated with the Public Health Department.
Right.
And then Privilege and Elections, which is the Election Campaign Finance Committee. I'm on the Commerce and Ag Forestry Subcommittee of Appropriations. That's what I was slipping. I just left the Higher Ed Committee to go on that, so that's a good excuse for my memory failing.
Senator, how about what kind of committees are you sitting on now?
I sit on the Rehabilitation Social Services Committee, which in the Senate actually does alcohol regulation, among other things, plus sort of prisons, social services, issues like that. And secondly, I'm on the General Laws Committee. It's General Laws and Technology, and that's kind of covers all kinds of different things. A lot of regulated professions. Basically, if you need a license in Virginia for anything from being a realtor, a lawyer, all the way down to service industries like plumbing, contracting, things like that, procurement, and then technology issues go through there. The Freedom of Information Act, things like that. Then third committee I'm on is local government. It's pretty self-explanatory. But we have over 400 local governments in Virginia. We regulate those. And then I'm also on the Virginia High-Speed Rail Commission, which is developing plans for high-speed rail from Washington, D.C. down to North Carolina. And also we've been talking in the last meetings about Atlanta, down to Miami, Texas, far away, but it's going to run right through the middle of the 36th Senate District and right through the middle of Delegate Sickles district as well when it's done.
Well, and transportation is such a huge issue for what you all have to deal with, and your constituents, as you're saying, they're up and down the road every day trying to get to different places to work. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about the efforts going on in transportation this session?
Well, the biggest issue, I think, one of the biggest issues for the entire state is the metro situation and trying to figure out how we're going to get the metro capital funding shortfall met. That we got to find some way to get another $100 million a year from Virginia into metro. The governor's plan that came out, I'm kind of disappointed with. I'm happy he came up with a plan, but unhappy with how it's been funded, because basically the idea is to take $100 million out of existing road and transit money, which we've already started to program almost, and put it into metro. And I think we need to find some other solutions. And I know Delegate Sickles has been in the middle of that.
Well, metro provides the state $600 million a year in taxes, and so we think that the state needs to step up a little bit more. We funded it originally mostly with the leadership of local governments, and they're still the primary generator of operating funds for our side. Mm-hmm. But there's been a lot of neglect of the system. It's an expensive system to maintain, and we didn't maintain it. When it got to be 30 years old, we didn't do anything, and now it got to be 4 years old, and a lot of bad news every other week in the newspaper. And so Mr. Wiedefeld, who took over 2 years ago, is by all accounts doing a great job cleaning up some of the management issues that we had there, and actually he's let go 700 people. Wow. So the system's running better, but we need that capital money over the long term. It's $500 million from the 3 jurisdictions, and our share is about 154 of it, and so we're going to try to raise that. I have a substitute for the governors. I feel like Scott. The governor's proposal was all on Northern Virginia. Mine is still mostly in Northern Virginia, but it raises the money in a different way. It's easier to raise and puts this issue to bed for a long time if my budget amendment would pass, which is it's going to be a challenge. But I think everyone working together, we got to have a solution this year. We can't let it keep going like it has been. So.
Right. Well, talk about everyone working together this year. It's a new legislature. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how things are working out now?
Well, it's especially new on our side. The Senate didn't have an election, but we have 19 freshmen, 16 Democrats. 15 of them came from seats that were formerly held by Republicans. I'm a Democrat. And so with a 51-49 balance now, we haven't really started taking up controversial bills, but we're all in expectation of having a more intense debate on several issues that are popular with the public at large, but have not been popular down here, like universal background checks, for instance, things like that, and Medicaid expansion in particular. It's probably the biggest overarching issue that we're facing, and we hopefully have the votes to do it now. It's going to be a negotiation, I think, to figure out exactly the way we're going to do it. Mm-hmm. And it's complicated by the fact that the administration in Washington doesn't want the program to continue at all. So we have to be the first state in a long time to accept the new money. There's 19 states like us that have resisted expansion. And so it's going to be an adventure. Hopefully we'll be able to work on a bipartisan basis with the leadership of the governor. He campaigned strongly on it. Compared to some other things we're doing in healthcare, it's an easy thing to do, because when I started here, we didn't have the infrastructure on Medicaid managed care that we have now. We have Medicaid managed care all over the state. It's been very good for people, and it's been good for the state too, because we've saved money by using it. And now we need to get our single poor adults working, all whom work, into routine preventative care. And so we're ready to do it. The state's set up to do it. And it's just a shame that we can't flip the switch. And the politics of it are hard for the other party, and so we're going to have to work through that.
Well, I guess with the flu we're going around, and the leadership is making sure everyone's getting their flu shots, because that margin is razor thin, as you were describing. And Senator, you've got a brand new lieutenant governor who's running the show.
Yeah, he's been doing a good job for somebody who has not been in our session watching the floor procedures and everything. He's actually been doing excellent. I was, when you're a freshman, when I was in the House, and you walk in and you have to deal with this weird Thomas Jefferson era parliamentary procedure, it can be pretty confusing. But not to mention having to run the chamber. So I think he's been watching a lot of videos trying to learn how to do it. And he's done an excellent job so far. And as Mark said, the change that has come to the House of Delegates came right home to the 36th district. I mean, before the election, the 36th district overlapped with 5 Republican delegate seats, and all 5 got replaced, 4 by Democrats and 1 by another Republican. And so I have 5 new delegates that I'm working with on issues to serve that area. And so, they obviously have a learning curve, but they're very good and very, very energized, and it's going to be a lot of fun working with them. And also, the diversity that came is incredible. I used to overlap with 5 south of the Mount Vernon Lee District area. I used to overlap with 5 white men, and now I overlap with a Vietnamese American woman, an African American, 2 Latinas, and Bob Thomas, who replaced Speaker Howell. So it's a big change. A lot of women got elected this year, and a lot of younger women too. They're going to bring a whole new voice to. 2 of the women that I overlap with are very young mothers and have children under age 1. So it's we have some new voices in the legislature.
Exactly.
It's really incredible what the voters sent down here to help us do our job better, and we have an historic number of women in the chamber now.
Right.
And as Scott said, just incredible diversity and lots of talent. Lots of talent, raw talent. We have a bright future in our party with these folks as they learn how to do this job and serve their constituents.
Yeah. Great. Well, you both are part of leadership with the experiences you all have, and I'm sure you could be great mentors to all of them. So why don't you tell us a little bit about some of the pieces of legislation that you're pursuing this year? Again, being here with the length of experience that you have, often you're asked to engage in some of the most difficult topics that are debated here in the General Assembly. So, Delegate?
Well, as we mentioned earlier, I'm working on Medicaid expansion, and I've got the basic state plan amendment bill that's the fundamental. We're going to accept it. It doesn't require any approvals in Washington. And then I have a bill that I'm carrying for the hospitals, but it's really a bill for everybody to figure out a way to pay for the eventual costs of expanding the population to this underserved childless adult population. And it's controversial. It's called a provider assessment bill, and there's one in the governor's budget which people don't really like, and so this one is a better version of that theoretically, but it's a work in progress, so that should take a lot of time. And on the Metro, I already mentioned that I have a budget amendment, but there's also legislation. Eventually it has to go in the code because you can't really raise taxes permanently in the budget. And so that is the trickiest thing. But I've got lots of human service amendments, some budget amendments for funding for education in the prison system, money for parole researchers for our parole board, and money just for human services generally. And coming from Northern Virginia, we have to worry about the cost of living up there. So I have a couple of budget amendments for the provider rates for helping disabled people.
Right. Talk a little bit and explain to the viewers how this budget process works. So you've got a number of amendments that are going to come in, and it's complicated. Why don't you talk about that?
Well, it is a mission. I've only been on this committee. It's my 4th year now to be on the committee, and it is a different experience. You learn a lot more about how government works. The agency heads come in to the Appropriations Committee and go through the line items and what they're changing, why they're changing, why they're proposing making these changes. Sometimes we like it, sometimes we don't like it. There's a lot of the spending we do is mandatory. There's not a lot of change in it, and so we do make a difference. We can make a difference on the margins in higher educations, K through 12. We've got to. The state is financially in a good position right now, very good position. And but we are fiscally conservative. We're not going to spend all the money. We're going to create a new fund to make sure that when times are bad, we've already got a rainy day fund, but this is going to be on top of it, a budget stabilization fund. Now that'll be how much we keep in that fund to keep Wall Street less nervous about us, because our overdependence on the federal government has a lot of people nervous. In our Hampton Roads area, is actually the economy is declining down there, and So we've got some problems in the economy that make people nervous. Our bond rating, which has always been AAA by all three agencies since 1938, no one wants to lose that. So we're going to stay on top of making sure we're fiscally sound. And then we've got a long to-do list of things, particularly in the human services area, with the rise and epidemic of autism and dealing with that. That's a big government expense. We have the opioid epidemic to address, and so balancing all that out is a big job. It's done collectively, and the majority has the most power, to be honest, with how this is done. But it is probably one of the most bipartisan things we do here is to get a budget. I hope that we can get 100 votes for the House budget. That would be the goal. I don't know if we'll get it or not. I mean, having Medicaid in the budget, it would be a big determinant on whether that happens or not. So it's what makes this fun. I don't know how it's going to turn out, but you just kind of plow through it, and the people with most seniority really have the most say in what the ultimate decisions are and where the big decisions are made. For instance, this body within next week has to decide, are we going to do Medicaid or not? Because there's $400 million spread throughout the budget that we would have to cut if we decide not to take it. So big decisions soon.
And they're the tough ones.
Absolutely.
All right.
The most political.
And so, Senator, tell us about some of the legislation you're carrying. You often carry a lot of bills.
Yeah, I've been developing that reputation. Actually, I put in about 21 budget amendments as well, but none of them as sort of big and all-encompassing as Medicaid, like Delegate Sickles is doing. But I did put in an amendment to fund a study of extending the Blue Line down to Lorton, Occoquan, Woodbridge, Potomac Mills, and Dumfries. We did the same thing in Fairfax back in 2011. I know Delegate Sickles was a big supporter of that, and right now we're actually in the middle of implementing brand new comprehensive plan changes to facilitate major changes in the Route 1 corridor. I want to do the same thing south all the way down to the Route 1 corridor in Prince William County. But legislation-wise, I've introduced about 61 bills, which is a lot. And I would sort of say the general theme, I have maybe about a quarter of them are sort of lawyer kind of things, which is what I do for a living. A lot of lawyers, judges, other people send me ideas of things that we ought to, like criminal justice reform or civil justice reform. In addition to that, I've got 6 bills having to deal with the coal ash problem in Prince William. It's actually a statewide problem, but one of the big 4 coal ash dumps in the state is in my district down in Dumfries Triangle area, Possum Point Power Station. And that's a solution we have to solve this year. It's going to cost probably between $1 to $3 or $4 billion to fix it statewide, and we need to come up with a legal framework where Dominion can be properly incentivized, I like to say, to handle this the correct way. What they want to do is just cap it in place and leave it and hope that it doesn't leak. It's already leaking in all 4 places around the state. I would like to see it basically properly stored and then recycled into other products, make some jobs, and just get rid of it forever. Then I've got a couple predatory lending bills. The Route 1 corridor has a lot of these sort of high interest loans, and a lot of people that are taking advantage of on that stuff.
And that's been an issue that's been around the legislature for a number of years. So why don't you talk about that?
Well, and we've tried to regulate them repeatedly, and every time we create a new structure to put them in, they figure out a way to get around it. And so the 2 bills I'm carrying this year are designed to shut down loopholes so that the existing laws we passed before are actually honored. So we have rate caps. One of the bills would put a 36% rate cap on all consumer finance loans. Right now, consumer finance companies can lend at unlimited interest rates if the loan is over $2,500, which is insane, and some loans go out for 200 and 300% interest. And the legitimate, I should say, the older consumer finance companies don't make those kinds of loans. But what's happened is other companies have come in, gotten a license after we shut down Payday or shut down Car Title and used that statute to do it. So I'm trying to shut that down and have a second one that the payday lenders have been using called the open-end credit. There's a product called open-end credit product. They give out people these credit lines instead of payday loans, and they use the credit lines to do the same thing they do with the payday loans. And it's designed to shut that down. I'm optimistic those 2 might go through this year. I know Senator Saslaw is co-sponsoring one of them with me, and the consumer finance industry is supporting my other one. So that'll be up next week.
And I know it affects a lot of folks in the military. So leadership in the military been engaged with this?
Well, historically it was a problem in the military, and you'd go to a military base and there'd be these, high interest places or used car shops all around, and they'd, do high interest loans to people like furniture and things. But Congress passed the law, I want to say about 5 years ago, limiting what you can do with active duty military. However, there's been some situations where people have left the military. As soon as they get out, they get whacked with one of these, and then they get back in or something. But historically, it's been a problem with the military. But the federal act, I think, has clamped down a lot on that.
Okay.
So, but yeah, and the military nowadays, they drill into their new recruits, a lot of which are 18 years old and getting their first paycheck. Do not sign up for these things, and so a lot of military folks are really sensitive to the issue.
Right. And some of the other bills you're working on?
I've got 3
the
bills.
61.
Yeah, I got 3 bills on. Well, first of all, I got my hands-free driving bill, so you can't drive with a phone in your hand. That's actually up in the courts committee today at 1 o'clock.
Okay.
It came out of the transportation committee for the first time ever last week, but then the lawyers in the courts committee said they wanted to take a look at it. I'm a little worried about what might happen. But, and also, one of our senators has the flu and hasn't been in for 3 days, and I need him in committee. I need his vote. So
Yeah.
We'll see what happens today. But that would be a big deal if it passed. Then I've got 3 education equity bills, and Delegate Sickles and I represent Eastern Fairfax County, and I've been disturbed by some of the education trends I've seen. For example, there was not a single national merit semifinalist out of the 350 in the county east of 95. And we have probably 6 or 7 high schools over there, and the children in our part of the county aren't any less smart than the kids in the rest of the county. And because of that, very few kids from our part of the county get into Thomas Jefferson High School, and I think Thomas Jefferson needs to change its admissions policies, because right now there's 12 schools in the county that sent no kids last year to that school.
Wow.
And so I have a bill to rework the way TJ does its admissions. And then I have 2 bills that have to do with whether how school systems can treat free reduced lunch kids. Basically says they can't charge them tuition for online classes, and they can't have an online education program unless they give low-income children a computer to use to be able to take those classes.
Right.
And the same thing with electronic textbooks. And that's a problem in our part of the county, where we have a lot of families that don't have digital devices at home or broadband. I don't know how you do school anymore today without a computer.
Right.
And it's absolutely a critical tool to have a modern education system.
Right, exactly. Delegate, you had mentioned Wall Street and its impact on the bond rating in Virginia. Why don't you explain to the viewers that process? Because it's very interesting how this works.
Yeah, Ray, I can't tell you that I'm an expert in this area, but we try very hard to please to make sure the Wall Street understands we're fundamentally sound, so we can borrow money at the lowest interest rate possible. And as I said earlier, we've had a AAA bond rating since they started rating states, and they get very nervous over things that to you and I might not think are a very big deal. Our pro-business rating has been hurt, and it's been over the last few years, but it's been hurt by forces that are not of our making. It's been hurt because of outside forces and what's going on in D.C. So we've had to react to that and to assure them that we're fundamentally sound and that we can keep that rating and keep borrowing money at the low interest rate. We have a self-imposed 5% debt reduction limit in our budget. So we borrow money for capital projects, particularly universities, but other capital expenditures, and we want to be able to continue borrowing at the lowest possible rate. So I think that many other states would, you read about getting in a lot of trouble, can't pass a budget, have pension issues that we don't have here, and we need to keep it that way. I'm glad we've got a governor who's a good government kind of guy, and he's not. We're going to be careful with what we do, but we're going to also try to meet the growing needs of our state. So I think in some cases we're going to, I've mentioned transit earlier. We're going to have to raise more money. The money we raised in 2013, we thought it was $1.4 billion at the time. It was much needed. We've got construction going on everywhere. It's unlocked a lot of construction projects, but we didn't do a lot statewide because we couldn't get the votes for a statewide package. So the money is in the 2 big regions, Hampton Roads and Northern Virginia. But I think the public has seen that we've done a lot with that money. We're maintaining roads like we've never done before. We're getting old neighborhoods
more pavement.
milled and paved now. And I think people can see that, and I think they'd be willing to, and they value our first-class rail system, and I think people would be willing to pay a little bit more for that. The governor proposed some new taxes, and I just don't like the ones he proposed, so we have a different set that's more broader base. So I think the public would welcome us, maybe raising some more revenues for basic infrastructure. So.
Sure. Town hall meetings are big things you all do to stay in touch with your constituents. We just have a couple of minutes left. Why don't you tell us a little bit about some town halls you've been doing and how you work those, and maybe who your legislative aide is and how they can be in contact with you all.
Sure. I always forget to introduce my aide, but
Yeah.
our legislative aides, when our constituents call us, are the first people they end up speaking to, and often when they have an issue, they're the ones that end up working them through those problems. Mine's Philip Scranage. He's been with me for about 6 months. And he's been excellent. Used to work at Supervisor Kathy Smith's office in Fairfax County. Now he's with me. Town halls, I've already had 3. One with Delegate Sickles this past weekend for our Lee District Town Hall in Hayfield. I had a Mount Vernon one last weekend, and also one in sort of central Woodbridge. This weekend I've got a town hall meeting 9 a.m. in Occoquan, the Occoquan Town Hall, I think. Or either Occoquan Elementary or the town hall, I can't remember, but it's in Occoquan for my northern Prince William constituents. Then I've got one in Dumfries Triangle, Montclair area at Forest Park High School in the afternoon, I think at noon. And then later that afternoon on Saturday, I'm doing one in northern Stafford, and that one's I think at 4 at Barrett Elementary School. And that one's with Delegate Jennifer Carroll Foy and probably Delegate Thomas, our new Republican colleague. And my Montclair Delegate Guzman's going to be there with Senator McPike, and Occoquan is going to be me, Senator Barker, and Delegate Ayala. So, but anyways, we get a lot of people out. I've actually been streaming them on Facebook this year, which has been very popular.
Great.
You can actually also go and look and see what was said at the town halls. The last 3 are up on Facebook on my official page, Facebook/Surovell. So I've been trying to be more electronically accessible. So.
Right. And so how do your constituents get a hold of you? What's your website or email?
Yeah, they can either email me, scott@scottsurovell.org, or they can go on my website, scottsurovell.org. My Facebook page is Facebook/Surovell. It's my official page. People ought to like that. If you don't want to like it, you can follow me. And then sign up for my email list on my website. It's important to get all that. And I'm also on Twitter at @SSurovell, twitter.com/SSurovell.
Right. So we've only got about 45 seconds left.
My aide is named James Hio. He's in the 5th session with me now. And we can be reached at info@marksickles.com. That's the best way to get me. We have had some great turnout at our town meetings that we've had. People are really energized now. They want to get out and see what they can do in their locality. The new administration, it's a year old now, has really motivated people to think about what government should do and how we should, how they can play a part in it. We had a good attendance last week going up against the Women's March. It was in our backyard, and we did okay even with that as competition. So thanks, Ray, for having us here today.
Right. Thank you all, and thank you for watching this edition of Cable Reports. I'm Ray Lemura. Mm-hmm.